Hi, I'm Bekim. Thank you for listening to Lending Thoughts, sponsored by Rocket Pro. Today, I'll be interviewing Frances Hinojosa, the CEO and co-founder of Tribe Financial. We're going to be talking about technology and innovation, banking versus brokering, and how to become the leader of your very own tribe. Take a listen in.
Good morning. How's everything going there? You're in Windsor today, right?
I am in Windsor, and where are you?
I am in Oakville right now.
Oakville, beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing. The weather's nice. We're like getting the last bit of fall in. I'm excited.
It's my favorite time of year.
Same,
Like, honestly, it
same.
really is.
Yes.
And I could tie it into so many things in business why this is my favorite time of year, but I'm not going to steal the conversation. I'm going to let you talk too.
Well, maybe we get there a little bit. I'm actually going to talk to you about your business. So nice to have you. I'm going to start out with a question that requires a lot of thought, but I'm going to ask you to tell your whole life story in 60 seconds or less and go.
All right, so 60 seconds or less. I am a Gen X that grew up as a latchkey kid in basically Sesame Street, so I'll give you that visual. Have always been a serial entrepreneur now, looking back in my childhood, because you just got to get things done and make things happen. Always grew up in housing. My dad was a builder, so fun fact, I could drive a forklift when I was 7 years old. From there, I transitioned. I went to school for psychology, decided to get into banking, and then just loved the idea of helping people through debt and tying in the emotional aspect of how emotional people get when it comes to money, especially when it comes to the debt aspects of things. And then intertwining the whole idea of growing up in housing and seeing how much homes mean to individuals. It was just a natural fit that I progressed into becoming a mortgage specialist and doing investment in corporate lending and doing all those fun stuff at the bank. Did media for a while there and then worked my way up and decided to jump out of the bank and start my own brokerage. And here we are 10 years later, or 30 years later in my career. Yes, I'm that old. And here I am running my brokerage here in Ontario. We're quite proud of Tribe Financial, and it just was a natural transition from start to finish.
Natural transition from forklift operator to psychology to bank
Yeah, from
to
the streets
founder.
of Sesame Street to forklift operator to psychology to banker to broker to owner.
I love that. That's like the perfect mortgage broker path, right? That's kind of similar to many stories, which is like, didn't know I was going to get here. Somehow I ended up here. You mentioned going from bank to broker. And first of all, we're thankful that you gave up the forklift to jump into this industry because you've done some amazing things. But I'm curious to press on that a little bit. So you were on the bank side. Were you originating as a mortgage specialist and then went on to originate as a mortgage broker as well?
I did. I actually started first as what was back in the day, they used to call it an investment lending specialist at the bank. So we would work with financial advisors, do investment loans, right? Margin accounts, that sort of thing. And I would say I was really good at it. And my mentor at the time, Mike Bonner, he's now the head of Canadian banking. He actually is the one that pushed me into it. He's like, you're getting salary. This is absolutely ridiculous. Like, look at your volumes. You need to make the jump over to the commission side of things, becoming a mortgage specialist. And I hesitated for a very, very long time. And then I finally made the leap over to the mortgage specialist side of things, did that for almost close to a decade. It's kind of funny when I look at my career, it's like in like football and sports, you have your quarters. Mine has always been in milestones of every 10 years. I find there's a natural shift in transition that ends up happening and an elevation. It's like, okay, I'm at the end of this journey. It's time to move on to another thing. One of the main reasons that I made the transition over, I love the bank. I was at BMO for my whole entire career. I know when I left, I had a lot of people say, like, this can't be true. Like, I was BMO. Like, I literally bled blue. So much I was BMO. My parents opened up their first account there in 1968 when they came to Canada. Like, in my world, there was no other bank but Bank of Montreal. But I saw the change in the lending landscape. Like after the global financial meltdown, you start to see the transition starting to happen with the B20, B21 rule changes. Common sense lending, as we used to call it when I started, like, 3 decades ago, didn't exist anymore. And I realized that if I really wanted to service my clients fully from their whole life journey when it comes to their debt, it was time to make that transition over into the brokering world. And It took me and my two business partners, they were both mortgage specialists at Bank of Montreal too. It probably took us well over a year planning it out, strategizing, doing the business plan, doing the vision of the brokerage. We didn't just make the leap over. We had a vision of what we wanted to do in
Hmm.
our careers in this company. We just didn't want to just be brokers. We wanted to do things differently.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally get that. And it sounds like you had a good mentor. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was like, you're thinking about new agents out there today and they're trying to figure out for themselves, like, do I go to a bank? Do I go to a brokerage? It sounds like you benefited from going to the bank actually, and you had a mentor or someone that you at least looked up to that led you down that path. What would you say to somebody who's just jumping into the industry today? Should they start bank or should they start broker if they want to learn the trade and try to grow through this?
I think it really depends. I wouldn't say it's a one size fits all. It depends on your life journey, but the key thing there is finding great mentors. That really what helps you with your journey. If you're going to go with the bank route, make sure that your leadership there is actually cultivating and supporting what your goals are in your career so you can succeed. And the same thing, if you're going to be a broker, I had this thing when we hire people, and I've said this before on different podcasts as well. I will ask people, why do they want to become a broker? And quite honestly, if the first thing they say is they want to make lots of money, I'm not too keen on hiring them at that point because I know how difficult things can be. I know it's not an easy road to be a broker and to understand all the nuances and to really be that ninja when it
Mm,
comes to structuring a deal. I look for people that are coachable. So if you are going to, jump into the brokering world, make sure when you're interviewing the brokerage, it's not just about the metrics, but it's also about the support that's there and have a clear understanding of what your journey is going to look like and make sure you're interviewing the person that's going to be mentoring you, that they're going to be able to support that journey too. So I don't think it's one or the other. It's where you're going to best support your vision moving forward and you have the right, like, you understand this is energy, right?
hmm.
I'm going to guess you invited me on this podcast because we had a great conversation that night when I first met you, right? Like, you can feel
Yeah.
people's energies and you can feel if you're on the same wavelength. I've talked about this countless times. I'm a huge believer when it comes to energies of individuals and actually feeling it. You can feel when it's being repelled or you can feel when it's being pulled in. And when you focus on the wrong things, when you focus on the metrics or you focus on the money, you're losing that energetic aspect that is so important for you to succeed in your career. So, bank, broker, just look for great mentors to support you on your journey.
Yeah, I love that. And you're so right. Yeah, we had that first sort of in-depth conversation. I started to ask you some questions about mortgage and like you light up the way that I light up and the way that other people who are super passionate about this light up and it's exciting. I'm like, oh, she actually really loves what she does and she loves who she does it with and why she's doing it. So I'm curious to ask a little bit more about the why. You mentioned, you broke off with some friends really and colleagues, and then you go on to start a company and start building from there. Can you just tell us a little bit about your team, your mission, what you're up to there, and who you really want to help and why?
Yeah. So when we came into this industry, I was telling individuals, I'm crafting an advisory based firm. And people thought I was absolutely crazy, or they'd be confused. Like, what is an advisory based firm? Like, you do mortgages, you give the best rate. I'm like, no, no, we give advice. Like, we started with that rhetoric, which is really interesting now that when you see like the regulators are pushing brokers to be giving advice, like, know your client and why you're making these recommendations. I would say that we were on the forefront of that going back over a decade, that we really were drilling down. It wasn't coming out here to build a firm just to get the best rate, set up the mortgage, and see you later bye. It was the lifelong journey. It was understanding that a product for a first time home buyer today is not going to necessarily be the right product for them when they're in their 40s and they're looking at other goals or they're close to retirement. So it was tying in that financial planning side of things I would see in the broker world quite lacking. Some firms were doing it, but not quite a lot. It was just like set it and forget it and come up for renewal and find the best rate. Like, people weren't necessarily drilling down to the underlying factors of tell me more about what it means for this house for you or this investment or this mortgage. What are your goals moving forward? Where do you see your life journey happening? And tying that into the recommendations that the clients were getting. So Number one, it was that. Two was also cultivating a community and a company where, our tagline is you belong. And to me, that's super important is, the agents that come into their firm, I want them to be their unique individuals. We're not here to create, like the soldiers that are all the same doing the exact same thing and molding into our culture. We're more of a tapestry of all different personalities. I like to say our firm is very much almost like the United Nations. We have every single background, but they're all uniquely different and they all service different clientele, but in the same sort of energy, in the same sort of wavelength, in the sense that it's an advisory based firm and they're providing advice. So that was really the grounding factor is one, being an advisory based firm, not only for our clients, but also being a community where agents can feel like they belong and get the right mentorship so that they're being coached and guided so they perform to their highest level and they're succeeding at the end of the day as well.
Okay. So my question then would be, what parts of the agent's day or life or them being a part of the company are like their own, and what parts do you guys sort of mandate, right? Because presumably, I mean, you call a company tribe and you talk about those type of values. You do have a certain way that you would probably like clients to be treated in a certain advisory based service that you just demand or expect from people. And then there's a place for them to paint and, of course, be themselves. But what are some of those core values that are important to you? And then where are the places where people can be artists for themselves?
I think that word demand, you can never demand people to operate at your level at your company. I believe that, but you can influence. And I think that's what the key differentiating factor when it comes to our firm is the three partners, we still actively broker on the most part. So we wear two hats. I don't broker as much, to be honest with you, that I did in my early days, but we still have, a bit of skin in the game that we understand what our agents are going through at the end of the day. That being said, it's all about the leadership. And think of it this way, it's very much like if you take the psychology, if you go down to the granular level and you say kids are going to behave how you behave, right? It's that herd mentality. It's when people are in that environment and they see the energy of the other individuals around them succeeding and operating at a certain level, just naturally that will come out at the end of the day. I tie in a lot to our corporate culture because of my background in psychology and emotional intelligence. I tie a lot of that in there and the caring and the understanding and slowing down conversations. Our training's a little different. It's not just all tactical when it comes to sales scripts or understanding just products and very metric oriented. There's a lot of heart and emotion behind that as well. It's how to have those intelligent emotional conversations, how to be comfortable and being uncomfortable having some of those conversations, how to pick up the key points when it comes into talking with clients to understand body language, voice cues, what they're saying, pausing. So it's a lot of that intertwined into our culture. It's not so much demanding things,
Hmm.
but it's through our training and through learned behavior of what we're doing. At the end of the day, I find that naturally it comes through. I'm not going to lie, there are moments that we've had agents over the years who's just not the right fit. And I think as a company, you have to be okay with that as a leader. If someone's not the right fit, I was saying you got to just put them in a canoe and paddle them off down the stream. It's totally fine. Like it's
Hmm.
not you, it's not me. We're just not the right fit. We're not vibing. I would never want someone at my organization if they hate where they work every single day. That's just a horrible way to be, in my opinion, as a human being. I value my agents so much that they are probably my utmost priority. And it's not just about them doing business. Like I make sure I take the time to actually get to know the people that work for my organization to a granular level of who they are, what's important to them in their life, and make sure that I support that. Because if they're happy in their personal life, it's going to then drive into their business and vice versa. Like
Hmm.
I know I can see now, I call it like an intuition or a vibe. If someone's not performing at work, it's not typically necessarily the work that's not making them perform. There's something else that's going on. And I think as leaders, we have to be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable conversations from the personal level because we're actually dealing with people every single day. It's as simple as sitting down and calmly saying to someone, Tell me what's going on. And just pausing and letting them talk and not putting up the ego and not getting defensive on it, because it's totally okay. Everyone's allowed to have their own perception, and let them communicate and be open minded to get the feedback from them. I would say majority of the time when I've done that with a lot of my agents over the years, I find out it's not work. It's not that. There's something else going on in their personal life. And I
Mm.
think as leaders and as companies, we can't ignore supporting our agents and our employees from a personal level as well. I think that's just as important as supporting them from the business level as well.
I could not agree more. What you're really speaking to is like the essence of humans, helping humans. I used to have a leader that had a best practice that I carry with me still today. And it's to ask people how they are 3 times. So you go up and you're like, how are you? First thing someone always says, good. And then you're like, yeah, how are you? And they're like, yeah, I'm good. And you ask them that third time, and they're like, oh, well, actually, my car broke down and I'm fighting with my spouse. And like, next thing you know, there's like, boom, like it just all starts to vomit out. And it's because typically the first how are you is the surface level.
Of
And you can't run
course.
around just like downloading your problems on everybody. But when someone actually tells you, like, I'm here and I'm listening, talk to me and let's have a conversation about it, and you show up as part of their tribe, pun intended there, and you're like, hey, I'm here to understand, I'm here to help, and you come from that place of understanding, that's when you break ground from like somebody who's a leader on paper to somebody who's a leader of another human being. And in many ways, they're also leading you, and it becomes this mutually beneficial relationship rather than this mutually necessary relationship of leader worker, worker leader. Like, that's not how you build great company culture. And I'm guessing your background in psychology has led you to the person that you are today to be able to create that type of culture for sure.
I think the background in psychology, but going back to what I talked about at the beginning, my background of my childhood, like growing up in that sort of Sesame Street, I call it, like literally it felt like Sesame Street. We're talking like Toronto low rise, apartment buildings, United Nations Immigrant Central. Like this was the 70s, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
kids just running around with like fire hoses and no helmets. And from the time, the street lights came on to it was off, right? Like everyone
Yeah,
took
yeah.
care of everyone. But I think that actually started my love and appreciation for human beings. And
Mm,
I think the best business leaders I saw out there are not afraid to have difficult conversations, but at the same time have a very strong internal caring nature when it comes to human beings, that they truly want the best for them. It's not just self-centered to themselves at the end of the day. It's like being okay to have those deeper conversations, not when people say good, they're good, actually listening to the vocal tones and going, I don't think
mm,
you are. Right.
yep.
And, I want to be the ear that listens, that maybe I can give you some guidance and mentorship of things that you could be doing in your life to make you feel okay. When you start to do that in a company, what you'll start to see is you create that trust factor, and that's huge. Trust is super important in business. That is part of building relationships. If you can learn how to build trust with individuals from a genuine level, like I'm talking from the soul level, build that trust, not surface, you'll see a difference in your performance in your business. You'll see a difference in your performance when it comes to your relationships. You'll see a difference when it comes to your companies. We're heading into a new cycle in business because technology is so prevalent. One thing that technology, I'm a firm believer in this, that can't fully replace is that heart energy and that caring that comes across when you're having conversations with people and looking them directly in the eye and just listening and providing that empathy for them and that coaching and that mentorship. You can't get that from machines. That's really what would differentiate you either as a leader or even as a mortgage broker out there. If you can figure that out and crack that and learn that skill, that's how you become a high performing agent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't fake care, I like to say. And you're talking about Sesame Street, it has me thinking about like it's starting to add up now why you are the way you are. Like it's that community, right? Like you understand how to coexist inside of community. And if you actually care about the community, then it starts to add up and you start to build a team and you start to care about what other people are doing and whether or not they're having success. And you start to care about your clients because some of those questions you're asking and I'm talking about are like asking people about like, hey, how are you? And they're like, I'm good. It's the same as like when you ask a client, hey, how can I help you today? And they're like, I just need your best rate on a 3-year fix. And your first instance, if you're a poor salesperson, is to go, here's the rate. But if you're good at what you do and you actually care about helping people, you go, why is that the most important thing to you? And they'll say X. And then you ask another question. Then you ask another question. And it turns out they actually needed a 5-year variable and they need to like sell their rental property that they're holding on to that's negative cash flow to help them pay down some debts and then apply it to the equity in their home. And next thing you know, you've got a full financial plan. And in the beginning, they just wanted a rate. And now you've transitioned from rate provider to actual advisor. And to hear you talk about that and what you build into your training, I think is so important. I think that's what makes great mortgage brokers. And I think it's what makes great communities of mortgage brokers. And I would love to see us maintain that level of spirit. On the topic of community, and now it's all starting to make sense to me because if I'm not mistaken, you spent some time with MPC. Is that correct?
I
On the
did.
board there or giving back? What was your role at MPC? What were you doing there for the mortgage broker community? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
MPC, I was on the board. I also did a short stint on the executive committee as well, or the executive board as a secretary. So a lot of MPC right now is very heavy on the government relations side of things, which is important. You know what? The government and the MPs and that are very busy and doing their own stuff. Like they are bombarded. This is what brokers have to understand. It's not just housing. They're bombarded with everyone putting their hand up saying my issue's important, mine's mine. And they have to filter it down and figure out, okay, what is the best for the greater good? That's just the reality of it. So a lot of the time was the government relations, listening to members, of what their concerns are. I know everyone wants everything changed and fixed overnight, but they have to realize that you can't steer a ship overnight to change it exactly as you want. And we go through cycles in the mortgage industry. That's just how the housing market works. I've been through, 30 years of different cycles, like everything from a dot-com boom to the financial global meltdown in the US. Yes, the Big Short, I lived it, saw it, was in it. So, they're all cycles that happened. It was just providing the advice and the experience that I obtained over the last few decades and tried to, hopefully make a little bit of a mark in the difference of the industry.
Do you feel like you made your mark?
No, not fair. You know what? I don't think looking back now, the board wasn't the place for me to make the mark and the difference. Really, truly, it's what I'm doing outside of that. So, the sidebar conversations that I have with individuals at events or people in the industry that reach out that, I offer them advice or mentorship and no judgment. I think that's the most important part. Everyone's on their own journey at the end of the day. It's not up to us to decide their journey. It's up to us as leaders to provide a bit of light on the path or just show them the obstacles that we went through and let them make their choices because that's part of the learning process and what I'm trying to do with the company at the end of the day. To me, I think that was more impactful than, the time served on the board, to be brutally honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for myself getting on the board, I thought it would be more impactful than it actually was. But I don't think that the board at the end of the day or MPC or any of the associations, they have a part to fill, but they're not the end all of all when it comes to our industry.
Is that just the complex of bureaucracy in nature?
Of
Is it a
course.
bureaucratic issue? Like, is it just like things just take so long to get done? I mean, there's some obvious ones right now. Every mortgage broker who does any bit of volume at scale and tries to do things the right way seems to be saying similar things over the last several years. Like, they're bad actors, but there's so many good actors, and we can't let the bad actors ruin this for us. We must do this job with diligence, and there are ways in which we could do that, and we could do a great job at that. And some of these things just seem so obvious on the surface level that would just improve the industry, improve the consumer experience, would eliminate fraud, would make lending better and brokering better for everybody. Why can't we just snap our fingers and just get them done? They're obvious to everyone involved.
If you're talking from an association level, you have to remember an association level, and you understand this, you've been around the block long enough. You have different people with different agendas that come on there. That's just the reality of it when you have associations like that. And it's not anything negative, it's just the truth. People going in there has, okay, this is my goals, this is my agenda, this is what I want to implement, this will better me and my company because everyone is different on what they want to accomplish. So bureaucracy happens because you got a lot of heads sort of bouncing off each other at the end of the day because I want this, no, I want that. I want vanilla, but I want strawberry, I want chocolate, right? But no one can figure out maybe we'll make Napoleon ice cream and have all three flavors, right? Like you're spending more time arguing why someone's idea is better than the other person's idea. I think there's a lot of hard truths in our industry. To your point, there are tremendous brokers out there that do fabulous work every single day. And there's also the bad side of it. But that's like any industry that's out there. The difference is that I believe in our industry is the lack of accountability of calling sometimes these things out. And as a leader, having those difficult conversations like, you know what, that's not going to happen in my house. And I don't care where you go. And I don't care how much this is going to hurt my bottom line at the end of the day because I operate from a certain level of ethics and morals and it's not driven by money. I want to make sure that, we're doing the right thing. What's the quote? What's the saying? You might know it better than me, but it's sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing that you can do at the end of the day because a lot of the times it goes against the grain of what everyone else is doing. It's being different. Do you know where the change is going to happen? And I thought about this. I had a conversation with someone else when we were talking this through. I do believe companies such as yourself, I think the bigger fintech companies that are out there are the ones that are going to have to create the change when it comes to digital verification. I think we have to stop waiting for the government to do it. You know technology and you know the advances. There's other ways to do this. You don't need to plug into CRA to get the comfort level that the client is legitimately doing what they're doing today.
Hmm.
You'd have to be naive or under a rock to not realize how public our lives are out there. If you have a digital footprint, I can find out anything about you today, right?
Hmm.
I'm more excited to see what you guys do at Rocket because I think, you know what? If you guys have the scope of doing it with technology, then you guys become the leader or another fintech company and being able to do that digital verification and let them catch up, right? You're going to need
That's a
someone in
good
this
point.
industry to do it first and let everyone else catch up because that's the only way innovation and change happens. I think sometimes we all wait around for everyone else to do it. And so everyone could do it at the same time. I think what we need to start to see is more people now with digital advancements to step up and just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be the first to do it. And this is what we're going to do and be brave about it. And trust me, everyone else will catch up over time.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think about it as social credit. And there are a lot of companies starting to pop up in that space and prove out some credit models that actually prove to be more accurate at predicting default than a traditional credit score. Probably doesn't surprise you, right? Like you could look at a credit bureau and that doesn't tell you everything that you need to know about an individual. And it also doesn't verify everything that you'd want to verify from regulatory and PII perspective to make sure that you understand exactly who you're talking to, what they're trying to accomplish, why, and is it legitimate? So I'm excited for the future there. There's some things that I think we can certainly do here in time. And we're trying to implement some of those things on the fly right now. I mean, some of it we're doing just with our onboarding with Rocket Pro, our broker channel lender. You guys are actually our newest partner in that space. And we're really, really excited to be working with Tribe. I'm curious, you've worked with so many lenders over the years, obviously a bank for many of them. That bank has since gone on to enter the broker channel themselves. You have worked with many of the other banks and other large monoline lenders in the space. What do you think needs to improve from the lending aspect? And what do you think that, I hate to label us innovators, but I like to think of us that way. But
You are.
innovators like us, thank you,
Yep.
looking at this a little bit differently, saying, okay, let's come in with a very fresh set of eyes. We don't have sometimes the weight of, this is the way it's been done for forever, but very fresh perspective on the matter to say, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Here's all these other things that don't make sense. Here's how we can improve on them. We're thinking about a lot of things like that, but from somebody who's been through it, seen it a bunch of different ways. When you see a new lender like Rocket Pro, what excites you, and what do you think we can do?
I was excited when you guys came into the market space, let alone signing up with you guys. We're going back a few years ago.
Yeah,
Because I've been so entrenched in the mortgage world, like I follow the mortgage world globally. I know I'm a bit of a mortgage nerd. Housing and mortgages
same.
fascinate me.
Yeah,
Right? Like it really does. I pay attention what happens in the UK and in Australia and in the US, and I find it super fascinating. Why I was excited with you guys coming into the Canadian space is like I was very cognizant of the advancements that the company was doing in the US, and that excited me because I find in Canada there's such a lag when it comes to innovation and when it comes to technology. My goodness, like 10 years ago, look at the lending platforms that we used to use to the advancements that are today. But then if you look 10 years ago of what's happening globally or was happening in the US, like light years ahead, like we're so far behind. You're right. It is the innovation. Going back to what we were talking about previously, I really do believe that innovative companies such as yourself and other companies that are out there, other fintech companies, are the ones that are going to be fixing the issues when it comes to worrying about falsifying of documents and that, because you guys get it. Like technology can fill that gap and fix that problem. Brand recognition, I think, is the other thing too. I mean, consumers in the younger generation are going to dictate where they're going to want to get their mortgage at the end of the day. Yes, they'll deal with the broker, but they're going to have a lot more input when it comes to that. And if you look onto the future of banking, in my opinion, those companies that are out there, like your Wealth Simples and your Neos and your Rockets, have such a better brand recognition when it comes to social media, when it comes to the internet, that, I look at my teenagers now, they'll recognize your brand over a company that's been around for 30 years in the industry. I'm talking outside the banks, I'm talking the monoline lenders, because they
sure.
haven't done a really good job of being forward facing to the consumer. And they're very slow to spend the money or innovate when it comes to their technology for the consumer as well. So yeah, it's all of that in between and thinking of the future. It's funny. A lot of the ideas I get from my business, I'll run it through my teenagers to be like, so just imagine you're buying a house in 10 years from now. What do you think of this, and this? Because I'm cognizant of the fact that they're the next generation of buyers coming in, and everyone else after that's going to catch up to them as well as to what they're doing. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of lenders are doing in this industry is they're spending so much time focused on getting deals in the door by trying to run the pricing model to the very bottom line and not adding the added value, tying it in there to, your turnaround time, like blew my mind.
Hours, not days,
Yeah,
right?
days. Some of the banks are doing it, but a lot of the monoline lenders aren't. Why aren't you underwriting documents or deals with documents up front? It is so inefficient to give an approval based on air. That's what you're doing. Like the amount of inefficiencies by operating your business that way just blows my mind. Then it erodes the client experience at the end of the day, doing something that is very stressful for them. So, I am now focused more on paying attention to the companies that are innovating. And the companies that are innovating, I'm thinking to myself, I don't really necessarily need to work with them because other than a super low interest rate, what other added value are you giving the consumer at the end of the day? Because that's what matters, the consumer experience.
I love that. 30 years in, mind is focused on innovation. I like that idea of just like asking somebody who's much younger. Like, think about that too. Where would you go if you were going to get a mortgage? And the crazy part is like, it's like TikTok and YouTube and all these other
Yeah.
places, right? Like I would start by searching here. Like they no longer like put their briefcase in their hand and like walk to the bank at the corner to try to figure out how to get financial services. They log onto their phone and whatever their like little, native search tool that they're used to using is, that's where they go. And the companies that show up there, which is one of the things with us at Rocket Pro, the first thing we did was like, hey, we're going to measure in hours, not days. So we're going to be extremely fast. We're going to flag that to the broker and they can pass that on to the consumer. They can make that promise to their client that I'm going to be super fast. And then we're going to deliver on that. And then we're going to give the broker a social tile that they can actually share to their social media saying, the deal that I just submitted was approved in 2 hours. and they could put that on their own social media, and the client can look at it and say, that was my mortgage that they told me would go really fast, and now they actually delivered on that, and it's showing up on social, and I'm getting social validation, social proof of that, and that flywheel starts to turn faster and faster. And that makes our team want to be faster because they look at that stuff and they get excited by it, and they're like, hey, people are loving this, let's do more of that. And then when you start creating a culture of speed and innovation, for us, that's how we've tried to show up. So I'm going to round it out by just asking you, then, you've done a lot of great things, obviously, founding a company and building a brand and making a lot of clients happy over many years, and you talked a little bit about children as well. But what do you want your lasting impact to be on life, this industry, or otherwise?
For people to be seen and appreciated and understood. I think that's the pitfall of technology today. The flip side of it is people can hide behind it so much now that I fear sometimes that people are not feeling seen and understood and appreciated. To me, that's the essence of being a human being. I want to know that every person that I talk to felt like that they were being seen and understood and I was listening to them. I think as a culture, sometimes we spend so much time strolling on social media that we don't spend enough time actually having conversations. It's through the conversations that you really get the stories and get the experience. And that's how we grow as humans. I mean, if you go back to evolutionary times, what did people do at night? You sat around a campfire and you told stories to each other, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
things were passed down generationally. I think, a lot of the times that gets diluted when it comes to technology and it's sending, like you said, a quick text, how are you? I'm good. Like that does nothing to build the connections and pass on the experience that I have to the next generation. Like I'm cognizant of the fact of my age. I know that I'm not going to be in this world forever. And I want to be able to pass on the knowledge and the learnings that I've learned throughout the years to make the next generation of brokers even better. I do believe deep in my heart, brokers are needed. They will never be replaced by technology. Technology will only enhance the experience, and teaching brokers how to balance that tightrope between the two to provide value to Canadian consumers when it comes to their debt. And also, lastly, for Canadian consumers to understand that debt should not be something that you set and forget. It should be part of your overall plan. I think culturally and generationally, we're getting better at talking about money. But if you think back, like think about our parents' generations, like you didn't talk about money. Like that was
Mm-mm.
just like, no, you did not talk about money. You did not have those conversations. Like they were not fun. I think we have to start creating that culture that it is okay to have these conversations, that, we see you, we hear you, we understand you, we care. We want to make sure that you are living your best life. There's no judgment here whatsoever. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out the plan and make sure you're successful moving forward.
I love that. It's making more sense with each time I ask you a question why you called your company Tribe Financial. We're going back to historical tribes now and the way they interacted to become the people that they were and become the people that we are today. So I think you've made an awesome impact already. And I know you're just getting started, and I'm excited to continue to watch you guys on your journey. Thank you for your partnership and your friendship, Frances.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.